they talk to the US Ambassador Brian David Hunt. We could give updates about the Millennium Challenge Corporation (MCC) Compact and other government issues. Them. Well, Brian David Hunt. Na the Salon US ambassador to Salon we take out of office inside August 2023 and replace David Reimer in September of the same year. Before he can Salon, if we don't get appointments for work na different sectors them within and outside the US, and if we don't serve as senior foreign policy advisor to the US Transportation Command inside 2022, and same way so work as office director for South Sudan and Sudan now the US Department of State Bureau for African Affairs from August 2019 to July 2022, and Seth don't serve as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Africa and the Sudans. You look at the profile of David Brian Hunt long, and he don't serve now different capacities them, but he take over office officially as ambassador, US ambassador to Salon inside September 2023, almost 9 months now that position there. We get another studio for can look at issues them we na interest of the United States government na Salon we one at the MCC compact development and other governance issues them. Once again, good morning and welcome to the program, Brian David Hunt.
Good morning and thank you very much for having me on Radio Democracy this morning.
From that brief introduction, we have you today in the studio. You've been working as an ambassador in the country for almost 9 months now. How has it been like?
Well, I find Sierra Leone to be a very vibrant society. The people have been very welcoming. I found my job to be interesting as well as very easy to carry out because I've been fortunate to have excellent access to the government, excellent access to the opposition, and a very broad welcome across civil society. So for me, it's been a real joy to be here, and I've enjoyed every moment of my time in the country so far.
Someone listening to you now would like to know what are the roles of the U.S. ambassadors in overseas countries that they are posted to work?
So I'm the representative of the President of the United States of America, accredited to Sierra Leone. My job is to carry out our foreign policy, to oversee our development programs, and to engage broadly with the Sierra Leonean public so that I can inform my government of the developments that are happening here, and so that I can share my government's perspective on international developments with the government and the people of Sierra Leone.
Talking about supervising or looking at some of the development programs that the U.S. Embassy or the U.S. government is implementing in Sierra Leone, also engaging Sierra Leoneans and interacting with them to communicate the U.S. foreign policy position in overseas country. You are working in Sierra Leone now. Take me through some of the programs that the U.S. government is implementing in terms of development.
So right now, our primary interventions are through the United States Agency for International Development and our Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. We have a long-standing relationship with the Ministry of Health and engagement with the government really across the health sector. We focus on maternal and child health. We focus on trying to help the government prevent pandemic diseases from entering the country. We focus on zoonotic health. That's the intersection between human and animal disease. We work very closely on the malaria initiative. You will have seen the launch of the new malaria vaccine recently, which is very much part of the program we've been working on. We work on HIV/AIDS. We work on reproductive and child health. Outside the health sector, we have various programs that are looking at economic development, environmental protection, agriculture, and most importantly, in my mind, democracy and governance, trying to help Sierra Leone establish the institutions necessary to make sure that the government's able to deliver for the people.
Ambassador, in the couple of months we've been seeing you going around across the country, and like you said, you are monitoring some of the projects that you're funding, and we have a look and say that the American people put their mouth where the money is. So tell us the status of this project and what's your impression?
So I think we've had very good success in the health sector. Certainly in prevention of malaria, the indicators are very, very good that we are getting control of that disease and moving towards elimination, which of course is the ultimate goal. You will have seen the statistics on maternal mortality, which have declined substantially over the last few years, bringing Sierra Leone more in line with other developing countries and ensuring that mothers and babies are safe and are able to obtain the health services that they need. So I think there we have a very good story to tell. I had the chance to look at some of our environment and economic work both around the Gola Rainforest and up in the Otomba-Kalimi National Park. I think also there we're making steady progress. There's always much more that can be done given the low levels of development in those communities, but I think the investments that we've made to try to help people improve their livelihoods are showing results on the individual level. I hope that we can bring that forward to the national level and really begin to stimulate the development of the Sierra Leonean economy. In my mind, that means investment in the private sector.
So is this assessment speaking to issues across the country where you visited?
Yeah, I think that there is broad progress in the social sectors and much more that needs to be done on the economic side of the house. And I think that applies broadly across where I visited in Sierra Leone.
Now, you spoke of programs that you are supporting in Sierra Leone, ranging from the health, environment, agri-democracy, and other sectors. What kind of support are you giving to this program? Is it financial or technical?
So we provide both financial and technical support. The financial support primarily goes through our implementing partners. The United States right now does not provide direct budget support, unlike the European Union and some other donors. We prefer to provide our support in the form of projects that we have better control and oversight of their implementation on the ground. We also provide broad technical support to various ministries in the forms of advisors as necessary in order to advance the programs in which we're working.
Now, let's look at these programs. How do you design your programs? How do you arrive at conclusion for supporting a particular sector as against another sector? How do you do that?
So design of a program generally takes about a year and a half in the U.S. government context. And that will involve multiple missions of experts coming out to Sierra Leone to talk with the government, to talk with the private sector, to talk with communities, to talk with civil society organizations, to understand the needs and to try to craft the interventions that we would hope our implementing partners are ultimately able to develop. In terms of choosing those specific interventions, we try to follow very much the data. So we look at the data in the health sector, we look at what interventions are necessary to raise the indicators, and then we follow where that data leads us in terms of the interventions. And those interventions are not necessarily the same in Freetown as they are in Kono, because they're very different contexts, very different communities, so we try to tailor our interventions in that way. In choosing whether to intervene in health versus education or health versus agriculture, we're guided by the National Development Strategy that the government of Sierra Leone puts out first and foremost. We then look at what other donors are doing, and we try to make sure that what the U.S. government is contributing is something that we are uniquely positioned to do, where we are the best positioned donor to act in that space. Historically in Sierra Leone, as I've said, that's been in the health sector because that's where we've been invested over a long period of time.
You've been investing in the health sector for over a very long period of time, and you said you are informed by the data. What are the data telling you about health in Sierra Leone? Is it okay, or you need more investment in the health sector?
Oh, we need much more investment in the health sector.
What are the areas that need improvement?
So I think first and foremost, we have to continue to build out the community health network so that Sierra Leoneans are able to obtain services, quality services, in their communities, and that those services meet the government standards for free delivery of health services across the country. There remain real challenges on the logistics side with getting medicines where they need to be at the time they need to be there. There remain, as I think everyone knows, real challenges with employing the number and quality of staff that are needed to run community health facilities, particularly in rural areas. And of course, while indicators are better on maternal and child health, malaria, other pandemic diseases, there's still a great deal of work that needs to be done in order to get to eliminating malaria, eliminating HIV/AIDS, ensuring that every mother and child is able to have a safe and healthy birth. And these are the ultimate goals. Of course, that's going to require more time, more money, more intervention by both the United States government and by the government of Sierra Leone.
So like you said, you supporting the government through projects that you fund as a country. Is it that you don't want to overburden the government by directly giving these funds, or you think you can better do it through your project?
So we have found in contexts like Sierra Leone that we have to be very careful how much we try to place upon the host government. We all know that the infrastructure here is still very much under development. The human capacity still needs time to grow and develop. We're also acutely aware that the World Bank, the IMF, the European Union, other donors do go through the budget support mechanism. So tossing ours on top of theirs is probably more than what the government can realistically manage through its systems. At the end of the day, we would love to get to a point where we have full confidence in the ability of the Sierra Leonean government to manage budget support from the United States, but there are still many, many steps that would need to be achieved in order for us to get to that place.
You mentioned earlier that you've invested a lot in the health sector, and you said there is a lot that needed to be done in the health sector for improvement. What do you think is the missing link with the host of investment that you said you've done in the health sector?
So I think it's several things. I think one, some of this simply takes time. Building from the very low base that we were starting with at independence, and then post-Civil War having to start again, post-Ebola in some ways having to start again. It's going to take time to get the indicators that we would want to see across the sector. Secondly, I think it's convincing Sierra Leoneans working in the health sector that they want to work in rural communities. Convincing nurses, doctors, medical technicians that they want to leave Freetown and go out to a rural village in Kailao district or Pujan district is very difficult, and we all understand that. The standard of living is not the same when one goes outside of Freetown. So creating the incentive packages that encourage people to make those decisions to go and serve their country at the community level, I think, is something we all need to continue to focus on. And then third, the infrastructure. We all know there are problems with running water. We all know there are problems with electricity, and that impacts the health sector, because at the end of the day, you need those basic infrastructure services to be able to deliver health to the population.
Host of programs that you are implementing in Sierra Leone, how do you do them? Is it directly by the United States agencies, or you do it through government?
So we usually work through implementing partners, which are generally either UN agencies or non-governmental organizations. The United States Agency for International Development does not usually implement their projects directly with their own staff. They will put out a contract or a request for proposal. They will receive proposals from implementing partners that are interested in providing the development services that they're looking for. They will evaluate technically, financially, and then make an award of funding to the implementing partner to be able to carry out the program. We find that the most efficient way to be able to move forward with these projects in a timely fashion and ensure good oversight and delivery for the public.
They normally say a man best servant is himself. Instead of you implementing these programs through UN agencies or non-governmental organizations, why not with the government directly?
Well, what we have found, as I've said, is that the government capacity, both on the human side and on the financial management side, still remains comparatively low. And we don't wish to overburden those systems by throwing more money to the government that it then has to manage directly through projects. There are times where we certainly work with government agencies, work alongside government agencies, but generally we have found that it is better for us to carry out the projects directly through implementing partners to complement the government's efforts.
These assessments, is it what you did for yourself or what government told you that they don't have the capacity? how they arrive at that conclusion to say government doesn't have the human capacity to implement some of the programs?
So USAID makes these decisions after consultation with a range of stakeholders, including the government. We certainly talk with government ministries about what their capacities are, what they can and cannot manage. We also talk to those outside of government about their perception of what the government capacity is. We talk to other donors, we talk to UN agencies, so we try to make sure when we're making these decisions that it is based again upon the data that's available.
Inside the program, we can look at the Millennium Challenge Corporation, we then call MCC Compact. We have 5 years agreement through the United States for provide grants to partner countries them for support program for reduced poverty through economic growth. Salon gets the peak salon for this compact inside 2022, and the compact development been done they continue before the 2023 election result come, and US government been take position for stop this compact force. So the governments do certain things them with not things there also, and offer the compact development the US ambassador the program. From that background that I've given on the MCC compact, where Sierra Leone got selected in 2022, and the compact development was going on before the 2023 elections. After the result, the US government announced that the compact development will be paused until certain things are done. For listeners and viewers of Ready Democracy, what is the status of the MCC Compact?
So we have decided to restart negotiations around the terms of the compact. That began earlier this week. There is a Sierra Leonean government delegation in Washington, including a number of ministers, who are meeting now with senior staff at the Millennium Challenge Corporation to flesh out the potential terms of the compact. We decided to go ahead and allow that to restart based largely upon the success that the government and the opposition have had in signing and then moving forward with implementation of the Agreement for National Unity. Now, the negotiation does not mean that a compact will ultimately be signed. The signing of the compact will still depend upon seeing the final results, particularly from the Electoral Review Committee, and seeing how those results are implemented by the government. So there are still a number of steps that government and opposition will need to take in order for us to get to a point where we can sign and implement the compact. But we have restarted the negotiations that, as you say, were paused after the problems surrounding the 2023 elections.
You paused the compact development and negotiation has restarted again. Are we saying the compact, Sierra Leone has almost completed the compact before the 2023 elections results jeopardized everything? Now the negotiation has restarted again. Is Sierra Leone going to start all over in the compact development, or going to start from where it was paused?
So we started from where it was paused. Now, there's still a lot of work that has to be done to update because things in the energy sector have changed in the intervening year, as we all know. But we did start from where we had stopped. We're still using the same baseline projects that had been discussed prior to the pause. But there are going to need to be adjustments that are made based upon the new realities in the country.
So you said there has been some improvements, and maybe that has made you to reconsider the negotiations or the meetings for the restart of the MCC. When you said some improvement, let's look at the Election Review Committee, for example, that was a prerequisite for this MCC compact for Sierra Leone. There has been a lot of speculations, from the opposition and even the ruling that, certain things are serving as an impediment to those committees, to those meetings, so that things are moved in the right directions. And you've been quite vociferous around those issues. What are some of these progress that you've identified?
So I think in terms of progress, first and foremost, we signed the Agreement for National Unity. That in and of itself, when I arrived in September, seemed to be an impossibility. So the fact that two sides were able to come together and even get that signed was a major achievement. Beyond that, they then went ahead and did what they were supposed to do and established the Electoral Review Committee, which is, again, a significant step forward and one that I think many people thought was never going to happen. They established the inter-party dialogue, which has met several times. Again, people thought was never going to happen. They've reestablished a regular dialogue between the SLPP and the APC. Again, something I think many of us thought we would never see in our lifetime. So we're making the progress that needs to be made. They've also come to agreement on how they're going to move forward with addressing the cases that the government and the opposition have cited related to political detentions, related to court cases against political figures. So I think we're making progress. We are still a long way from being to a point where we could say we've concluded everything under the Agreement for National Unity. You mentioned roadblocks. I'd cite a few. First and foremost, all government agencies need to cooperate fully with the committee. The president has been very clear that it is his desire to see the Electoral Review Committee produce a full and comprehensive report. He has been very clear that he expects cooperation from all government agencies, both those that are directly under the control of the executive and those that function independently. So I think it's very important that when the ERC makes a request, and that's a joint request from both government and opposition members for documents, for access to personnel, that those requests be honored. It's essential for their work. Secondly, we have to take down the rhetoric. I was very distressed to see recent rhetoric from both sides attacking the leadership of the APC on the one hand and the leadership of the government on the other because of their decision to move forward with national unity. Death threats, threats of violence, threats of disrupting the economy, these sorts of things are just not appropriate. What Sierra Leone needs is an environment in which everyone is working together to promote national unity, to back the men and women who are serving on the Electoral Review Committee, to give them the faith of the country so that they can move forward what are critical recommendations that will ensure we have free and fair elections in this country moving forward.
Okay, we shall look at the work of the Tripartite Committee and the U.S. position on the work of the Tripartite Committee in depth shortly. But let me take you back to the issue of the MCC. And you mentioned that Sierra Leone's government delegation is presently in the U.S. to engage the MCC executive. What is the expected outcome of this meeting?
So coming from this meeting, we should agree upon a text that both governments are comfortable with for the compact. That text will cover a broad range of issues, including how the compact will be implemented, how the contractors that are doing the implementation will be treated, and it will identify the specific projects that both sides have agreed they want to carry out under this compact. It will also identify things that the government will need to do before those projects can begin. A lot of that relates to reform within the energy sector that is already ongoing. And it will lay out the responsibilities of the U.S. Millennium Challenge Corporation going forward in the implementation.
Now, you rightly mentioned that this delegation, there and the renegotiation is to start. Is compacts or the grants possible?
Yes, it's certainly a possibility. As I've said, it depends upon whether or not we see the results of the Electoral Review Commission, whether those results are ultimately implemented by the government. If both of those things happen, and I believe that's certainly the intention of both the leadership of the opposition and the leadership of the government, then there is every reason to believe that the compact will be approved, that it will be signed, and that it will ultimately enter into force.
Now, the compact, when you go through the U.S. Embassy's social media account, most people keep asking if the U.S. government not to give the money directly to government. Is the MCC giving directly to the government to implement the project, or how will the grants be implemented?
So the way that the MCC operates, we will establish what's called the Millennium Challenge Authority here in Sierra Leone. That will be a joint government of Sierra Leone, government of the United States, and civil society of Sierra Leone entity that oversees all aspects of how the compact is implemented. So that entity will be responsible for selecting the contractors that will carry out the infrastructure work. It will be responsible for selecting the contractors that will carry out the evaluation and monitoring. And it will ultimately be responsible for ensuring that all of the works are brought to a successful conclusion. The actual financing is overseen jointly by the MCC and by the MCA. We don't write a check and hand it over to the Ministry of Finance. It doesn't work that way. What we do is we release funds to fund the contracts that are approved by the MCA. So when the time comes, when we are ready to get to the construction phase, the MCC will do a public tender process. They will receive bids from contractors who want to carry out the infrastructure work. They will review those bids for technical compliance and for cost, and then ultimately make decisions upon the award. Once the contract is awarded, the contract terms will specify how funds are released to the contractor. It's usually done in a phased approach, so as they conclude one phase, another phase of funding is released, etc.
We don't look at the MCC and now look at the work of the Tripartite Committee. And from what you've said this morning, it seems that the continuation of the MCC compact largely depends on the outcome of the Tripartite Committee, the work of the Tripartite Committee. What do you want to see at the end of the day that will speedily or speed up or restart the negotiation or the development of the MCC compact?
So from the United States view, what we're hoping is that the Electoral Review Commission will put out a comprehensive report that looks at two areas. First, legislative and constitutional changes that are necessary to ensure that the various deficiencies that were identified in the 2023 elections, the 2018 elections, the 2012 elections do not repeat themselves. And secondly, we're hoping that the committee will make recommendations as to how the government moves forward with accountability for the incidents that took place during the 2023 elections. So assuming we see a report that addresses those two issues and that the government then moves forward with implementing the recommendations from that report, which of course will involve the full parliamentary opposition as well, then we will be in a very good place to move forward with signing the MCC compact.
The US, through the USAID, funded implementation of the Electoral Reform Committee, and June they are wrapping up. What is your impression so far with the work of the committee?
So the committee members have taken their work very seriously. I've had the opportunity to meet with them individually and as groups at various points during the process. Every one of them is committed to doing the right thing for this country. They may have disagreements as to the exact specifics of what legislation should say, but I am convinced we have a group of men and women on that committee who are true patriots, who want to do what's right for Sierra Leone, who want to do what's right for the long-term development of this country's democratic institutions. I think they've done a very good job at setting aside partisanship, of putting country ahead of political party, and of looking at what's really going to be best for the Sierra Leonean people. So I am quite confident that with the support they're receiving, not just from USAID, but from a range of international donors and technical agencies, they will be well positioned to provide a solid report to His Excellency the President.
Just last week, the Tripartite Committee team members, including the 2023 flag bearer for the opposition, Dr. Samuel Kama, and also the co-chair for the opposition, Dr. Kaifala Mara, were to meet with the President, but due to certain reasons, they did not meet. They have been updating different sectors. They were to update the President. You funded the Tripartite Committee's work. Have they updated you or briefed you about what they've done so far?
So the UN resident coordinator, who is one of the tripartite chairs and represents the donor community on the committee, has provided us with regular updates on the committee's work. We've also had the opportunity, I've said, to meet individually and in groups with various members of the committee as part of our ongoing diplomatic engagement. So I feel we've gotten very well briefed as to what the committee is working on, what their concerns are, what their challenges are, and how they're moving forward. It's very, very tragic that the younger sister of Dr. Kamara passed away last week, and my condolences to him and his family. And that, of course, delayed necessarily the meeting with the President of the Republic. My hope is that will be rescheduled once the mourning period for Dr. Kamara's sister has passed, and we'll be able to see the President of the Republic get a direct briefing from members of the committee on their work.
You made mention of some of the things that you would like to see in the work of the Tripartite Committee, or the recommendation that will give urge to the US government to restart the compact development. In the briefing that they've given you, are these things visible in these briefings?
Yes, I think that much of the work of the committee has centered around those two issues: the question of legislative and constitutional reform and the question of accountability. So I'm confident that the recommendations coming out of the committee will address both of those areas. I want to be very clear that the United States is not taking a position as to what the solution should be. Those are for Sierra Leoneans to decide. The committee needs to make those recommendations. They need to make them in a Sierra Leonean context. And we're not saying that any specific change needs to be included there. What we're going to be looking at is the totality of the report, and hopefully see it address those two sides of the coin.
So as you said, the outcome of these tripartite recommendations, all the meetings, largely depend on the MCC grant, availability to Sierra Leone. At this point, are you totally satisfied?
Well, I haven't seen the final report yet, so until I see the final report and its implementation, I can't say that I'm going to be totally satisfied.
With what is going on presently, the meetings, the bottlenecks.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. And the reason I'm very optimistic is that the leadership of both the government and the opposition have been very clear that they want to see this be a successful exercise. Both Dr. Kamara and His Excellency the President have stated repeatedly that they believe electoral reform is critical for the future of this country. Both of them have been equally clear that they believe national unity is critical for the future of this country. So with leadership like that have already taken what I think are very politically courageous steps to work together, I'm confident that we're going to see the results that we need coming out of the Electoral Review Committee.
Concerns are largely most times from the opposition. What have they been telling the U.S. Embassy with regards the work of the Tripartite Committee?
So I know that the opposition's concerns are very much covered in media. I will say that I have heard concerns expressed by the government as well about how progress has gone. I think the primary set of concerns that both sides have, and it's a concern of members of both sides, is that one, they're not always receiving the cooperation they need from the full range of government agencies, and two, that there are still individuals out there on both sides of the aisle who are issuing threats against the committee, against the leadership of the two parties, against the entirety of the national unity process. And that needs to stop. It's fine to disagree with whether and how we should move forward in Sierra Leone. It's not okay to put out threats against individuals.
This seems to be a concern to you. You've made mention of it twice. And do you in any way identify any set of people that are behind these threats?
So obviously that's a question for Sierra Leonean law enforcement to look into. I don't have the technical capacity to go into individual Twitter accounts and determine who the users are or who's putting them out there. But I will say that I have heard from leadership of both political parties their very grave concern about this, which is why I'm concerned about it.
Does these threats in any way have any impacts on the outcome, or would have any impact on the outcome of the Tripartite Committee's work?
As I said, I think we have very courageous men and women working on the Electoral Review Committee. I've not seen any indication that any of them are going to allow themselves to be threatened out of moving forward with their constitutional responsibilities. So I have every confidence they'll continue their work. But this environment is very dangerous for Sierra Leone as a whole.
We are going for a short break, but quickly, when you talk to the opposition or you talk to the ruling, they have their different positions on the work of the Tripartite Committee. For some, there would be a rerun of the election. Is that in any way possible?
So, one, the rerun of the election is something that has come up multiple times from multiple quarters in the media. The scope of work that was laid out for the Electoral Review Committee, both in the Agreement for National Unity and in the Constitution of the Committee by the President, makes no mention of a rerun of the elections. And I think it doesn't do so for a couple of reasons. First, the time frame in which the electoral results could be challenged in court has long expired. The opposition made a decision to pursue other means to resolve their disputes than through a court challenge. Under Sierra Leonean law, as I understand it, a court challenge is the only way that we could look at invalidation of the electoral results. And as I say, under your law, there are specific time frames under which that has to be undertaken, which have expired. So I don't think that that is a realistic scenario to talk about. I think what we need to be looking at, as I've said, is one, legislation, and two, accountability. I don't think talking about invalidation of results or rerun of the elections is helpful because it's not realistic.
Now, turn now for make we take on our messages as Kapindi.
Yeah, the first one on Facebook, they say, Ambassador, how can you rate our current peace and tranquility in the country? Also, the U.S. government position on the past election.
This one say U.S. is seen in the eyes of some people to be leaning heavily in favor of the opposition party. Can you clarify your position? Also, why is the MCC compact now tied to the tripartite findings? From Alim Wuri, now with Facebook, now with 077-981-981 line.
This other one, they say Radio Democracy want to know what is the mandate of the Tripartite Committee. Well, I think say we don't espouse and the ambassador also don't talk on that.
This is from Samuel A. Contest, Radio Democracy. We want to know what is the mandate of the Tripartite Committee if we are expecting new election or rerun election. What if ESL is not able to pull out the result? What should be expected?
This other one, Radio Democracy, kindly help give the meaning of the word tripartite, because our viewers and listeners in upcountry will want to know the meaning for better communication. Okay, continue for listening. We'll give the meaning soon.
Okay, we continue for look at more issues inside the more text messages them inside the program Good Morning Salon. This one say here is what I have problem about our independence and sovereignty. How can we be dictated to on our elections and our national affairs just because they are offering grants to us? More text messages then from Amidou Zainab Mansarina on Facebook. They say Sierra Leone should understand that MCC. Okay, we'll continue for look at more messages them inside the program. Mr. Ambassador, this one from McTenna, New England Village. Say, Mr. Ambassador, when are we going to see the US government engaging in infrastructures like roads and bridges?
This other one from Facebook, they say, Mr. Ambassador, sir, the current events that are taking place in West Africa now, especially development that took place in Chad, where the French and Americans have been asked to leave, and they are bringing in the Russians. Don't you think bringing stiffer conditions on the MCC and others will lead to the country looking for another option?
This one say, Ambassador, okay, no, just one tell we say they not believe we people them for handle the money, making them go through. Do not them for implement them projects them. More text messages them inside the program Good Morning Saloon. This one say, why is the US government always okay? Continue for sending text messages on 0779819181, and also now we Facebook page they take them inside the program. This one say we want to know what is the mandate of the Tripartite Committee. More messages on the role of the Tripartite Committee. I think the ambassador don't answer them, but go emphasize on them more. Okay. 077981981 are the number for sending text messages them, or go on our Facebook page and drop your comment on issues the more they talk. This one from Ibrahim Samura na we Facebook page. They say, why are your consular office are rejecting 99% higher number of visa applicants under your leadership than before? Still on we Facebook page, this one from East Banks now we Facebook say, with the state of the hospital, no lights, no pipe-borne water, and the general condition, the man still say we dey get progress. Papa God help Salon. The program Good Morning Salon they continue for sending text message on 07798198119 on also now we Facebook page we they take wanna comments them. This one on the issue of project implementation, and this one say there seems to be a pattern of US funding going to private companies. Why is it like that? Is it a lack of trust in African government to implement projects? These are some of the messages them we will keep on for come with them as soon as they send them inside the program. David Branhorn, these are some of the messages that have come in so far. You can respond to some of them.
Sure. Let me start with the listener who asked for the definition of tripartite, because I think that's very important. The Tripartite Committee was set up under the Agreement for National Unity. The reason they call it tripartite is because it has 3 co-chairs. One of those co-chairs comes from the government of Sierra Leone, one comes from the All Parties Congress, and one comes from the United Nations. So that's why we call it tripartite, because there are 3 parties involved in chairing it, and 3 parties involved in the work of the committee. In terms of what is the committee's mandate, I think the committee's mandate was to review all of Sierra Leone's elections since she became a multi-party democracy, and to determine what reforms were necessary to address the repeated deficiencies in the electoral system that have been identified by a range of domestic and international observers over time, and that are of concern to both the government and the opposition. It was also asked to take a very specific look at the 2023 election and make recommendations as to what accountability measures could be put in place for some of the issues that took place during that election. So it's very much open-ended to look at those, but the mandate says that whatever the committee recommends has to be realistic and it has to be implementable, which is why when people talk about are we going to invalidate the results and have a new election, as I said earlier, Sierra Leonean law is fairly clear on this point. That can be done by the courts based on an electoral petition filed within a specific frame of time. The opposition chose not to file a petition seeking the invalidation with the courts during that time frame. They decided to pursue their grievances through other means, which is absolutely their right and their decision. But it does mean that right now, as we understand Sierra Leonean law, there isn't a space for a rerun. There isn't a space for an invalidation. So what the committee is focusing on is what is implementable. And I think we all need to be prepared that the recommendations coming out of the committee are most likely to focus on legislative and constitutional reforms and some forms of accountability mechanisms. As far as the tie-in between the committee and the MCC compact, what we have always said since day one when we started the discussion with the government around the MCC was that to be eligible for the MCC grant, the government had to show continuous progress towards democracy in Sierra Leone. The elections of 2023, unfortunately, did not go as any of us had hoped they would. They did not raise to these international standards of a free and fair election. There were very serious concerns that were raised about their conduct. That meant that we could not find at that point the government was still moving consistently to improve democracy in Sierra Leone. We had discussions with the government. We said in order for us to move forward, you have to demonstrate that you are committed to democracy, that you are putting in place things that will address the concerns that were raised during the elections, And it was the government and the opposition that decided they wanted to pursue those reforms through the Tripartite Electoral Review Committee, which is why the work of that committee is now so important to the signing of the MCC. It's not a new standard, it's not a change standard. Those democratic requirements have always been there. It's the government that decided the U.S. system. We do not become involved in visa adjudication decisions. There is a firewall between my office and the consular section. Only our consular section can make decisions about visas. I will say the refusal rate for non-immigrant visas is not 99%. The refusal rate hovers around 45 or 50% of the visa applications that we receive. That rate has been steady over time. There's not been an increase since the 2023 elections of visa refusals. The rate has been steady across time. And the reason the rate is as high as it is because we have a serious problem with Sierra Leoneans who have decided over time to misuse their non-immigrant visas. My consular section does a host of visa validation studies to determine whether Sierra Leoneans who receive tourist visas are returning to Sierra Leone after tourism in the United States. And unfortunately, we have a large number who've chosen to misuse their visa. And that means that we have to be more cautious as to who we issue non-immigrant visas to.
So the issue of the rejection of visa should continue or would continue?
So we will continue to evaluate every case on its own merits and determine whether we believe the traveler is going for legitimate tourism and plans to come back to Sierra Leone. But every time a traveler chooses to misuse their visa, it makes it that much harder for the next person to prove that they're intending to come back.
Is it a new standard set at the immigrations or the consular department, I beg your pardon, to refuse visas based on your findings?
No, I mean we've had the same law since 1985. The Immigration and Nationality Act hasn't changed since then. The standards for adjudication of visas haven't changed since then.
The roundup with the ambassador now the program, but quick messages now. Facebook page. This one, Mohammed Tarawali. Please must ask the ambassador that if the tripartite investigation find out that the election was rigged, and they recommend that there should be a rerun, and this one they say please let the ambassador talk on the issue of the proxy they stood for Creekdin. With those two messages, you can run up with them quickly.
Yeah, sure. I think I've said my views on the rerun. I think the block to anything like that would be Sierra Leone's law. Sierra Leone's law is relatively clear on how electoral disputes are handled, and we're well outside the time frame where that law would allow for such a rerun to take place. The committee can certainly recommend any number of things, but I think we need to focus on what is most likely to be contained in that report. And I think it is very unlikely that the committee would recommend something that could not be implemented under Sierra Leone law. On the issue, I'm not sure exactly what aspect of Mr. Dean's businesses the Inquirer is asking about. Obviously, we have Marapa Mining, which has been a very successful iron ore project here in Sierra Leone with a substantial U.S. investment. It's had tremendous benefits both for the government in terms of revenue and for the local communities in terms of the community development contributions. I'd say that project is going quite well. We look forward to phase 2 coming online, and I think it really does represent the very best possible collaboration in the mining sector between communities and a very, very credible international investor. I know that Mr. Dean has made a bid on the Australian Stock Exchange to purchase the majority shareholding in Sierra Rutile through one of his other holding companies, different than the one that is involved in the Marapa Mines operations. I believe that bid has now been extended through July, so we'll all have to wait and see. whether shareholders elect to sell the majority of their shares to the company which has made the offer to take a controlling interest.
Ambassador, in less than 1 minute, you've done quite a couple of media rounds across the country. Is this a new strategy for you to accentuate the wishes and aspirations of the American people to Sierra Leoneans?
Yeah, I think it's very important that ambassadors engage with the media and that we are visible and that the Sierra Leonean people hear directly from us about the views of our respective countries. So I hope to continue to engage with media outlets across Sierra Leone during my tenure.
The work of the Tripartite Committee is wrapping up in June this year, and after that, when are we seeing the kickstart of the compact negotiation again?
Yeah, so we'll hopefully see a result from the Tripartite Committee on June 18th. The MCC Board of Directors would next meet on June 26th. That would be their first opportunity to review the compact that's being negotiated this week and make a decision whether or not to move forward with it. I don't know whether they will take it up at the June board meeting. I think that depends upon the report that comes out on the 18th and whether that deadline holds. And then following that, if the board decides they want to move forward with the compact, we will see the implementation phase of the committee's recommendations, I expect, roll out through July and August in the Parliament, and then hopefully we would be in a position to be able to sign in early September, assuming that that implementation does in fact move forward.
Okay, now yes, we did on this edition of Good Morning Salon today. Plenty thanks to we studio guest today, one of the Ambassador David Bryan for taking this opportunity for joining me.